Welcome to a special series called The Global Crisis Monitor, featured on the Treasury Update Podcast. Thank you for joining. Each week, the Treasury Coalition, a group of Treasury-oriented firms which you can find on treasury-coalition.com, promotes a global survey covering critical issues and responses whenever a significant disruption is underway. This podcast shares key information from the surveys and analysis of the broader market to support the profession in optimizing current response and future preparation. The weekly surveys run from Wednesday through Tuesday, and results are shared each week via a podcast and digital report. Sign up on treasury-coalition.com and take the 5-minute survey each week. We appreciate your participation and teamwork. I would like to start off by asking, why did Strategic Treasurer spearhead the Global Crisis Monitor?
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. So the reason we spearheaded this and started pulling organizations together in a coalition to handle that was the Covid-19 pandemic was expanding across the world, having not only health impacts, but also economic impacts, changes what central banks were doing, what companies had to do. It was having a major impact. And we wanted to measure and see what's going on through an event, how people are responding, what they're looking at, and measure that throughout the course of an event. Because there are different significant events that happen over time. And it seemed far superior to start to gauge what's going on through an event rather than waiting for an event, whether it's 3 months or 3 years, to dissect things after the fact. We wanted to get information in the hands of Treasury professionals, financial professionals, as things are unfolding in a way that hadn't been done before. And so we thought it made a lot of sense to help arm Treasury people with this information and do it in the form of a group or a coalition to help broaden the impact and reach.
Stepping away from our podcast discussion briefly, we wanted to encourage you to take the Global Crisis Monitor survey repeatedly while it's live. It runs from Wednesday to Tuesday every week. You can go to treasury-coalition.com and follow the links. Add your voice and insight so that as a profession, we can take positive and knowledgeable steps to move our organizations and nations forward. Invest 5 minutes each week at treasury-coalition.com and get great information and insights while helping our profession and organizations. Now back to the podcast episode. So what is the Treasury Coalition? Why is it relevant?
A global issue or a major regional issue usually has a lot of players involved. And this is something that impacts not only countries, but individual companies and the overall organization. And it seemed like it would make sense for a lot of Treasury organizations to pool some of the resources together to ensure we have very good and quick responses, since we're measuring things on a weekly basis. And getting people to jump in on something where we can work collaboratively or in a coalition framework made a lot of sense. And we do a lot of surveys. We do like 12 or 13 annual surveys. And so it seemed to make sense for us to take the lead on that part and involve a lot of great leading Treasury companies from different areas of Treasury technology and banks to participate, to help gather this information, to add ideas for questions. And we'll be tapping the market too to say, what should we be asking from week to week? In addition to, some of the questions that will be consistent, throughout an event or a crisis or just a significant disruption.
Excellent. Can you share how the monitoring process works? When does the survey run?
Sure. So the survey runs, we're running it weekly. That could change, but as a coalition, we're dropping the survey. It runs from Wednesday to Tuesday every week, and that's our cadence every single week. So the monitoring part is taking the snapshot of some same questions and other questions, sharing those to the market. So a question that may appear 1 week can gauge where things are, a static snapshot of an attitude, a position, a view, a perspective, or an action. For example, we might say, how many people are working from home? Well, maybe we don't need to measure that every week, but, okay, it's 90% in the US and it's, such and such percentage in Asia and Europe, it's this other number. So there might be individual things we ask one time, but there are other questions that we ask that we'll ask week to week. And so monitoring is seeing how these items change over time. What's your view on your company's response and preparedness? How is your organization handling this economically? What are your views on when we'll move to the inflection point? Are we past the inflection point? When do you think the major disruptions, from the particular event, when will they end? When will we return to normalcy or normalcy? And so we'll look at those things over time so you can see where people are, how that may differ from geographies or by industries, and see how that works. And so that's very useful in the midst of a particular disruption. But we also think it's going to be helpful as we run through the different issues that occur from time to time, every several years, or sometimes in multiple years. There's some, physical event or catastrophe that makes a difference.
Is there anything you are seeing now, Craig?
We're in the middle of the first week of the release of the survey. So there are some things, I'm looking at some of the aggregated data. It is interesting the level of concern people have. Treasury and finance people are a very, I'll call it stable, thoughtful, reasonable, unemotional bunch. They look at facts and see, how is this going to happen to us? So how is that going to impact us, our company, or the overall economy? And so that's a really good group to task what's going on, to see what's occurring. It is interesting to see. Next week we'll release one with some of the actual results. We did a webinar early this week, and one of the polling questions we had is, who's working from home, who's working from the office, who's working from another location? And we were right at about 90% of people working from home. The majority of the people attending that one were from North America. I'm sure we've never seen those kind of numbers working from home, attending a webinar, but business continuity plans are in play. That's changing how we work. And I think we're learning what worked in our business continuity plans, what do we need to adjust, and what are some insights that people are gaining as to what to do. So we've seen some pretty interesting information come forward with what are people doing with, on the investment side, et cetera. So it's really interesting to see what amounts to a massive peer group sharing information back and forth. But I'm looking forward to sharing those results both on a podcast, but also in written form to everyone who takes the survey and sharing it out through the Treasury Coalition. So a lot of good stuff, but stay tuned for that. Thanks for asking, but I'm going to hold back a little bit.
Is there any helpful tips that you can share now with our listeners?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would share them from the survey, but certainly some helpful tips is what you've heard. Listen to the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control if you're in the U.S., or some of the different health organizations about how to protect yourself and your family and those you love and those you come in contact with. Being careful physically is important. The other thing that I would say is, make sure you're staying focused on the things you have to do for work. You may be working from home. There may be some distractions, but make a very concerted effort to make sure you're protecting your business. You're ensuring you have the liquidity you need. You're making the process move ahead. You're protecting the organization against cyber fraud. You're in a different environment. There's certainly activities that you can do there. For example, you might get approvals from an email, or you might get approvals that someone stuck something on your desk for doing a wire transfer. Well, now it's coming over attached to an email. There's a lot more exposure to that. Make sure you're thinking about security. Do your out-of-band authentication or verification by calling the person or connecting with them in a different way than payment instructions were communicated to you, just to make sure everything is right and safe. And I think the other thing to keep in mind of, and I guess this is a little bit on the security side, is you're at home, you may not have the same type of firewalls, filtering, blocking, ports blocked that you do at the office. So just use your work computer for work stuff. Don't click on other sites or do surfing in a way that could lead you or open you up to more vulnerabilities. Save that for your home device. Yeah, so those are a couple things that people may be wanting to think about. Staying focused, staying focused on your work, taking care of your family and those you're in contact with. Those are a couple of the large items.
So what kind of tips would you provide men and women across the nation that are working from home? I mean, this is a reality for most families now. Is there any tips that you can provide on that?
Yeah, I guess, you have people that may make noise more than just the dog barking or the cat scratching your leg, with kids making happy noises or maybe not so happy noises. So, find places where you can have more or less uninterrupted conversations if possible. But I think people are going to be pretty understanding where that's the case. My office, I never realized how much we feed songbirds. But we have a lot of songbirds around, and it really gets picked up on the headsets. So people are like, it sounds like there's a bird there, and there certainly is a bird when I'm talking to them because they're enjoying all the food we've set out for them. So I guess it's just, find a space where you can work. Don't work in your bed, or if you can avoid, don't work in your bed. Use that for sleeping and have a separate space if possible, but just realize you've got to flex as much as you can. I don't know that I can really offer good advice there other than, when you warn people, there might be a loud, my granddaughter's in the house today and she makes a lot of noises and I can't control her because she's under one. I think just making sure people are aware that, it's a different environment, and I think everyone will give the margin and grace that you need to for dealing with those other types of situations that come up from everybody working from home or almost everybody working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Craig, when will we hear from you next?
Our plan is to roll this out every week. And I think the release of this series, each episode will drop at noon Eastern on Thursday. So towards the end of the day if you're in Europe, middle of the day if you're on the East Coast, and in the morning if you're on the West Coast or in the Pacific Islands.
Thanks so much, Craig. Stay safe and healthy.
You too, Meredith.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.